Thank you very much, Saul. So the first thing to say is how difficult it is to sit here and speak after your bishop has spoken so eloquently. Bishop Graham, we're so grateful, and Saul was so grateful for you and the team putting this together. So we are going to continue speaking, as is throughout the theme, of caring for God's creation. As Saul has just said, this session is about practical steps towards net zero, that ambitious plan that the bishop very clearly set out for us. So just to reiterate who each person is. So I'm David Long. I am the chair of the Environmental Working Group in the Diocese. And that group seeks to encourage and enthuse all the churches and chaplaincies, as Saul has said, on their eco-church journey, as well as to engage in biodiversity. We just had wonderful photographs outside in all the beautiful nature to put to one side around this church, and also to look to see how we can support churches when we realise the challenges of coastal erosion and also flooding. So to my left in the middle, the rose between two thorns, most definitely, is Barbara, who is the Diocesan Environmental Officer. So I have this big title. I can't do anything without Barbara. She is the key, the linchpin to all our work with the environment. And luckily, because we were struggling until you came along, Ed. So Ed Cottrell is the Net Zero Programs Manager, and we give thanks for your arrival, Ed, we really do. And Ed has just confessed that he hasn't sat and done one of these things for 15 years. And I just said, get used to it. So it's lovely to hear. So, this caring for God's creation is absolutely crucial. And I think we all know that, and we're all agreed, or else we wouldn't be in this church. If we are, as a church, to ensure we care for God's creation, we need to look at it missionally. We need to have it right in our outlook as a church. We need to dream a dream. We need to conjure a vision for our rural communities, for all our communities, as we seek to care for God's creation. We need to be a witness. As the bishop said, we need to be evangelistic about it. So apart from being chair for the Environmental Working Group, which I do on a very part-time basis, I'm a full-time priest serving a rural community not far from here of 7 churches. And I was asked just in this brief introduction to give you a snapshot of that. Our rural churches, and mine in particular, last Sunday, Bishop, close your ears, I only had 7 in church in the morning. So often we feel curtailed because we have a lack of numbers. I have a PCC with 3. We increased by 1. We were very excited. PCCs are completely overstretched in our rural communities. But as the bishop said, caring for God's creation is something all our communities are involved in. And while I have ensured that all our PCCs, to the best of my ability, they don't all agree with what I say, have caring for God's creation, the environment, as a standing agenda item on each PCC meeting. I know that those PCCs cannot all lead on that item. They've got so much also to care about. So we've looked out further into our community, and we have people who have a tangential relationship with church who are leading on this. So there are very different ways we can engage our community on this journey, and we should look to be creative in our missional outlook. Let me hand over now to Barbara, the DEO.
I've got my own microphone. Thank you, David. So I'm going to go on a slide, I hope. Yeah, okay. So I'm literally just going to whistle through, picking up on some of what Bishop Graham said and some of what David said, and then I'm handing it over to Ed, because we want this time to be mostly about you guys sharing where you're at with one another and then with us, so we can have a good chat. I just want to talk very briefly about how the bigger picture that Bishop Graham set, the global picture and the national picture, fits in with our diocesan context here. So transformed by Christ, prayerful, pastoral and prophetic. This is our vision, which I hope most of you will know, being part of the Diocese of Norwich. And the work of the Diocesan Net Zero Working Group and the Environment Working Group and the reach of Eco-Diocese and Eco-Church, which has already been mentioned, sits within this. Because to enable all life to live abundantly, creation care needs to be at the centre of our prayers and our intercession. It needs to be at the centre of pastorally caring for all life, including wildlife, plants, animals, as well as those humans affected globally by climate change and locally, putting into place practical measures to help reduce our own carbon emissions as part of that. And it needs to be at the centre of prophetically speaking out against the injustices caused by the mismanagement of our planet's resources. So that's the context in which the two working groups sit, and they give shape and strategic decision-making to ensure that we reach those targets that have already been mentioned. And the Environment Working Group, which we're all part of, and David very ably chairs, holds a responsibility to drive forward eco-diocese and eco-church across our area. And that fits both within and drives the route map to net zero. Bishop Graham talked about the nationwide route map. We have a diocesan route map as well, which you can see on the website. And that includes a mention of biodiversity, which also fits in with the land motion that was passed at Synod back in February. So as part of our commitment to working towards net zero, we registered as an eco-diocese within a Roche's award scheme for churches in England and Wales who want to demonstrate that the gospel is good news for God's earth, which is, I love that strapline because to me that's what this is all about. Bishop Graham mentioned this earlier, and Polly Eaton is going to talk about it further this afternoon, so I'm not going to go on about that now. However, if you do want any help with that, come and see me. When we registered 3 years ago in this diocese, we had just 36 churches registered and 6 bronze awards and 2 got to silver. So Bishop Graham's shared our numbers since then, so you can see that we're growing. But to try and get to Eco-Diocese Silver, which is our next target, by the end of 2026, we need 260 registered, 195 awarded, and a third of these, so that's around 65, need to be at least silver or higher. So we're on a journey. It's a big target. But when I'm out and about, which I am since I've been taking on this role in the last 6 months, I'm getting out and about into parishes, and I am seeing churches engaging with eco-fairs from Alton Broad to Eton, and wildlife audits from Harleston to Holt, and prayer and praise both inside and outside from Surlingham to Aylsham. We're working in partnership with others in their local communities and showing that this is mission in action. We're also looking to build a network of eco-chaplains who will enthuse and inspire neighbouring parishes and benefices on their eco-journey. So do let us know if that might be any of you, because I'm really hoping to recruit some today, so be aware. If I'm heading your way, don't duck. Or somebody that you might know back in your parish. And alongside churches getting involved, we'll continue to develop and keep account of ensuring that creation care values and practices are embedded in our diocesan finances, our ministry training, our schools, our land, our buildings, and our lifestyles, and in partnerships with other denominations and other faiths. But to help us all, both in parishes and across the diocese, plan better, we do need better data. And with more accurate baseline data, we can measure our progress. So you're going to hear this a few times today. The deadline for completing the energy footprint tool, which is available on the parish returns dashboard, is the 31st of July. If there's one thing you take away from today, it's to pass the message on in your parish and benefice about the importance of this, because it helps you plan as well. And our net zero action plan is already being outworked across the diocese, as Bishop Graham mentioned, in our churches, schools, offices, clergy homes, and in our land holdings. We're working with neighbouring dioceses. Ed is part of an Eastern region team, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're learning from each other, some of those demonstrator projects you heard about earlier. But we all need to work together in this room and outside of this place, and there is support available. There's going to be another slide that shows that support available, which is up there, I think. And Nick, David, and I are here all day today to chat, and I'll share our details again on those slides at the end of this presentation. But now I'm going to hand over to Ed.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm Ed Cotterill. I'm the fairly newly appointed Net Zero Carbon Advisor Program Officer. I've got so many titles, I've got confused myself. So yes, this conference has come a little bit early for me because I'm only 2 months in, so I'd rather it was a bit later, but here we are. So as Barbara suggested, what we want to do in this section is to explore in a little more detail how we might reduce our carbon emissions from our churches. And when I think about this, it seems to me that, as we've seen in Bishop Graham's speech, there's solutions out there already that we can apply that will help us achieve our aims. So then the question becomes, how do you choose the right one for you? How do you identify the correct solution or solutions that get you where you want to go, which best suit your church and the way you use it? So I'm going to put some discussion points up on the screen that we can have a look at. Oh, one at a time if you can. Was that you or me? Ben. Ben, you go back one, thanks. So yeah, these are just some ideas you might want to think about. I'd like you to talk amongst yourselves for 10 minutes after we've gone through these, and then we'll do a Q&A after that, and hopefully a whole bunch of learning will come out of that. I'm as interested in your questions, given that I'm so new, as you might be in my answers, or potential answers. So yeah, let's start. So how do you currently use your church is a pretty key question to ask. How often is it open? How much of it do you use? Where do people sit? All sorts of things like that. But then if we move on, it might be an idea to think of how you might like to use your church in the future, because that might have an impact on the decisions you make. And what impact on your thinking would have a warm church, a warm welcoming church make? It may be that whole opportunities open up that weren't there before by installing a certain system. So you might want to investigate that. Obviously, understanding the energy use in your church is pretty key if you're trying to make decisions. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get an energy bill, I'm like, I have no idea what happened there. So being on top of that is definitely an important part of the journey. This is a little bit, going a bit sideways. What degree of uplifted energy bills would be acceptable if it meant your church was being used more? That's something you may want to investigate. Is it something that would scare you? Always loads more money going out, but then if you've got a lot more people coming in, how does that affect your mission and your ministry? And finally, this is another thing to think about. What other carbon reduction potential does your church and its surroundings possess? So things like maybe electrical vehicle charging in your car park, things a little bit outside the box. So another thing you could factor into your plan. So yeah, that's a few things for you to think about and talk about. Don't feel like you have to restrict yourself to those things. You can talk about anything you want and ask me questions about anything you want. So I'm going to stop now, let you talk amongst yourselves. I know it's a bit difficult in box pews, but do your best. And we'll come back in 10 minutes and accept some questions. Thanks.
And just to say that for those of you who are online at this point, please don't feel left out. Chat to yourself. But if you have got some questions you want to ask, do put them into the chat on the side of the live stream, and we'll do our very best to get to you as well. Thanks.
So, who would like to kick us off with a question to our panel? I'm going to go straight to the back first of all, to Andrew.
Thank you. We were talking about energy and the fact that in many of our small rural churches, the economics don't stack up to putting solar panels on the roof because the churches aren't in use day in, day out. And so obviously green energy is the next best thing than creating your own. But we started to talk a little bit about community energy cooperatives, which exist in different parts of the country, whereby energy which is produced locally in solar farms and on people's roofs is sold through feed-in tariffs, into a local cooperative, which then kicks out funds for the local community. I believe that the church has a role to play here, and I wonder if there's any appetite in taking that forwards to look at whether the church could help people to create community energy cooperatives, because I think that would be a great step for us.
I'll quickly answer that, if I may. So the Environmental Working Group are looking at this. So we have a subgroup looking at this to see if we can pilot it among that Nick has been involved in it. Nick Cannon, DAC Secretary, who's going to speak a bit later. So we are looking at it, and I completely hear what you're saying. And I think there's some creative ways we can look at it, because there's absolutely no point putting solar panels on Matless Church, which is the church closest to my house. There's no point, I don't think, at the moment, putting solar panels on Baconsthorpe Church. But there's a lot of point in putting solar panels on Baconsthorpe Village Hall and being creative about how that might be able to fund some of the energy within Baconsthorpe Church. So we've got to look at it very creatively. I think cooperative is really, really interesting, and we have the little subgroup working on it, and we hope they're going to do a little bit more work later. The Bishop also mentioned the church commissioners and some of that money, but we are not St. Peter's Mancroft, and I suspect none of us here are St. Peter's Mancroft. We are small, and we have to be creative and think outside the box.
Thank you, David. I think Lucy has a question.
We were just wondering in our little group why you haven't mentioned wind power or water power. I'm from a Broadland church, and we're very close to the river indeed. And we're also next door to a youth centre. And we would like to show all sorts of environmental solutions to the power problem.
Yeah, I didn't go, well, I'm a bit loud, sorry. I didn't go into the details in the slides, but I think that fits into the last point, which is what have you got around you that you can use? And wind power, if you're in the right place and you could get it. Wind power is pretty specific in where you need to be, but if you're in a very flat, open area and you can get a tower high enough, then it's a perfectly reasonable thing to look into. Water, I'm not sure. Normally you need a bit of height for water to work, and Norfolk's probably not the best county in Britain to be going down that route. But, another thing, if you want to investigate, go for it. All these things are there to be explored, and if you come to some good answers, then, come and see me and we'll see if we can get on with some stuff.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any other questions from the floor? Yep.
Yes, what we were wondering, because we are a small rural parish, is what sort of considerations we should bring into the equation in thinking about putting solar panels on our roof. We already spend an absolute fortune maintaining the church, and I suppose the very kind people who back us up and give us the money may just question whether or not it's nice to have but not essential. Oh, and we're a Grade 1 listed building.
Yeah, this one's a bit of a moving target. I think a bit like David has mentioned, the mechanics of what you can do with the energy you produce if you do go down the solar panel route is shifting. Co-ops is one thing. Octopus Energy will allow you, if you're a single entity, to sell electricity from one part of your entity to another part of your entity now. So that's quite good, but only works. It's only really set up for companies at the moment. They've got a big warehouse with loads of roof space, but doesn't take up a lot of energy, and then they've got an office building without the roof space that does soak up the energy, so you can transfer between. That's something I will be looking into, whether we can explore ways of doing that between various church buildings or village halls, all sorts of stuff. So it's a moving target. I think watch this space. I wouldn't be focusing on it at the moment. I think there's plenty to be getting on with before we go down that route.
So I think if I may just add on to the end of that, I think, which is what Barbara and I were just discussing, so the Bishop recommended the 6 principles that he said, which I thought were really important. And as I took them, and Rachel might be able to help here on there. So you've got to keep your church well maintained. Renewable energy was his second. So I'm trying to see whether or not, and getting off these tariffs is a nightmare, but getting onto a decent tariff, which is renewable energy, LED, waste less, self-resource, and at the very last, we then offset.
We've been talking about solar panels, and whilst they work very well if you're going to use the energy, the actual payback, if you don't and you want to sell it back, is very small. And the other issue is the working life of a solar panel is about 25 to 30 years, and certainly by 50 years they'll be generating very little, so you're storing up problems for future generations. I personally don't think that's where you should be focusing your energy. Reducing your energy consumption makes a lot more sense. The other thing is, if people want green tariffs, that's something that I can help with. That's what I do for a living. I'm a utility broker. So if anybody's wanting to move to green tariffs. And also, when you're talking about energy costs, the most important thing is what you're paying for it. The two issues, one is reducing your consumption, and the other thing is making sure you buy it at the right price. And a lot of that's about timing when you do the contracts, which you need professional advice for.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Thank you very much for that. Do you want to respond? No.
Would it not be an easy win to perhaps think about doing the housing that's, so it's normally not listed, it's normally quite modern. Would it not be an easy win perhaps putting solar panels there or air source heat pumps and things? Is that something that might be considered in the future?
Clergy housing.
Yes, clergy housing.
Yeah. So we have about 250 properties across the diocese. And there are a couple of demonstrator projects underway at the moment. And again, Ed is part of the team that's looking across other dioceses as well. So we're not all reinventing the wheel. The thing is that these things take time. So there's one house that's had everything thrown at it because it's so complicated. It's all about how much you pay to retrofit an existing building as opposed to actually sell off some of our properties and buy ready done ones, if you like, ready cooked ones. And also where we need our clergy. I mean, that in itself is complicated and changes all the time. So it's complex, but it is underway. There are already things being done, and part of that then is learning from those, and it will take time because then you need to watch them for a year or more to actually see what works well and then what can be replicated. And then also working across with other dioceses means that we might have better buying power when it comes to buying in some of these technologies. We've got a strong collective voice then. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The place to put your solar panels is on the buildings that use the most energy, and I think Chris was making that point too. So that's another thing in your PCC that you can have a think about. It's like maybe, I still don't know how many church halls we've got. I don't quite know how many churches we've got, but around 650, but church halls is a bit of a mystery. And yeah, definitely if you have or know of a building that is using a lot of energy on a daily basis, those are the ones you really want to put your panels on at this point in time.
So we're just talking figures just then. So we think it's 26k plus to retrofit every single clergy house. So it must be a bit higher. Then you're talking about 50 million for the diocese. So it's enormous amount of money. Ed was very keen to get the sort of the base units out of parsonages, rectories. So he twisted my arm, so I embarrassingly am going to give him all my electrical figures. So we need to try and get that to get clergy to engage in this, which is, it's our private stuff, so it's quite complicated sometimes putting it into the church domain. So there's movement. It's just this is difficult.
Excuse me while I move round into the side aisles.
Do you have any advice or help that you can give to help us understand how to better understand our energy use in our churches and buildings?
Oh yeah, get a smart meter. Smart meters will tell you all sorts of stuff that you didn't already know, particularly if you can get a half-hourly one, you literally, it's every half hour what electricity you've been using. They also, we're still trying to work this through. Domestically, you can get an app, so that's all on your phone, and you can just look at it anytime you want. Commercially, that seems to be a bit more of an issue. But that kind of stuff, it's amazing how much difference it can make just understanding kind of half hour, hour by hour, what's going on in your church building or any building, you can then really identify things that you could change that make quite a big difference.
And if I can just add to that, Andy Bryant isn't here from the cathedral, but one thing that they found fairly early on was it might seem obvious, but where you've got different people coming through the church over the years, it's understanding how your heating system works and how you control it and how long you have to switch it on for before people arrive, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's really getting to know your own system. They found they made huge savings at the cathedral just by making sure that the people who had to control the heating, so all the verger staff at the cathedral, because obviously that's an enormous building, if they gave them more training on how to use the heating system properly and brought their bills down considerably as a result. So sometimes it's not actually changing the technology, it's looking at what you've already got and being smarter about using it, and that's where the smart meter comes in as well, to give you that information that then if you track it over time, you can see what the differences are. There's another question at the back there.
Reappear. I think one question here and then maybe one more.
What worries me is our experts have told us that we've got 5 years before we're in a real calamity. Now, looking at those questions on the board there, on the screen there, it seems to me that what we should be doing is not only just talking within our churches, raising those questions, but are we able, please, to take those questions out to Joe Bloggs, out there, as often and as regular as we possibly can, bearing in mind we've got 5 years, so we're told. You know, you can use the news, you can use the television, you can use all sorts of ways of getting it across. So could I please ask that you carry on with this, but get those questions out to Joe Bloggs?
I'm glad you raised that, because that's exactly what a lot of our churches are doing in some of on their eco-fair days and things like that. I was over at Sheringham, Paul's grinning away at me over there, and it's not just about the churches doing, but it's churches working in partnership with others to put on days like that are not only educating the public about this, but also campaigning, working with others. We can't do it on our own, and this is the best bit, I think, about the whole eco-church, eco-diocese thing, is the campaigning and the working together, and the raising our voices and the writing to our MPs, and that's why we've got 5 key asks at the moment that we're encouraging people to use at hustings or directly with anybody that calls on their door, which has actually been put together by the Church of England, not this diocese, to actually ask candidates on the door, what are you doing about these 5 key things on environmental issues? It's got to be at every level. You're absolutely right. Thanks for raising that.
Thank you. I think just one more we have time for, if there was one. Thank you.
Hi, this isn't actually a question. This is a kind of a further point to the point about how you can understand your building use, carbon use better. I know there is an organisation, a tech company in Sheffield called Cherubim, which is doing a pilot which is collecting, sort of working with churches that have sensors in their church to understand sort of their heating use and their environmental use of their building, and they've got a program that monitors that, and sort of they're developing an app. So I just thought that might be useful for people here to know about if they want support. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy. Great. Thank you so much, David, Barbara and Ed for that. And I think obviously you are available here all day and then in the office after that.
A couple more things that we wanted to say at the end.
Very quickly, if that's all right.
Very quickly, yes.
Of course.
Okay. We're literally just going to show you this 1 minute, 90-second video to just get that message home about EFTs.
One of the great and most important challenges that we all face in the current world is how to steward God's earth properly, securely, and so that it has a future, not just for us, but for many generations to come. One of the easiest ways that you can support the entire Church of England in doing that is by completing the Energy Footprint tool. It only takes under half an hour at very most. It's easy, it's quick, and it will help everyone to baseline, to plan, and to work out how we can all work together to move towards net zero by the year 2030.
The survey, I have to say, was quite easy. There's a bit of information you need to gather, such as your energy bills. It was quite simple to fill in the form, and it was actually quite revealing when I saw the end result. We came out with 890 kilograms of CO2 being generated in a year, which is quite significant when you think that globally it estimates that one person generates 4 tons of carbon in a year. There are certain areas where we can improve on, and we shall be working on that.
We share weekly eco tips, and it's amazing to talk to members of the congregation and see how the changes that we're making as a church level influence the decisions that people make on a personal, domestic level. So one of the uses of doing the energy footprint tool is that it allows you to make better decisions about everything that you're doing in future. One of the ways we've done that is through realizing that we could switch from non-renewable to renewable electricity sources and save an incredible amount of our carbon footprint just by making that switch.
So if you're like me, you were hesitant about doing this, then don't be, because I can assure you it is pretty easy to do, and it's quite rewarding at the end of the day and quite informative.
And next slide. So we will put up those two slides that just flashed before your eyes. We'll put them up at the end. But I just wanted to wrap up before we hand over to say thank you very much to Ed and Barbara for all your questions. Those slides that will come up eventually is please send any questions that you have that you didn't ask. Please send them to Ed. And Ed will then disseminate them accordingly. And I just wanted to finish on a slightly strong note, if I may. So under Bishop Graham, we've become asked to be a prayerful, pastoral and prophetic diocese. And I think caring for God's creation hits our prophetic element full centre. At a recent environmental working group meeting, I was said, we keep nagging people about the energy footprint tool. And I was hauled up in that meeting and said, how dare you say that? It is so important. So if I can reiterate that, please, 31st of July, let's get that base data, and it will really, really help us. It is part of our prophetic duty, and we owe it to those 1 in 10 young people that the bishop mentioned. We have to step out, and we have to speak, and we have to act about this. It's both our greatest challenge as a church and our greatest opportunity to show the love of Christ revealed to all. This journey is not easy. I have a tonsured monk behind me in that picture, because I thought St. Francis of Assisi, who loved nature as we do, said this: we start by doing what's necessary, then what's possible, and suddenly we're doing the impossible. The bishop said, every action matters. Let us put our actions in prayer and with supplication. Jesus said, looked at them and said, for mortals it is impossible, but not for God. For God, all things are possible. Thank you.